Hi, I'm Aaron Woodman. I'm from Utica, New York. I am the Civic Engagement Chair for the Utica Oneida County NAACP branch. I'm also the Executive Assistant at HMJ Consulting, and I am an outgoing Deputy Campaign Manager for Columbia Harris for Congress.
Hello, everyone. My name is Will Javian Dawson, and I currently work for SUNY Polytechnic Institute here in Utica, New York.
Decided to do this podcast because we wanted to use this opportunity to educate people on what civic engagement and voting is and why it's important, and to talk about how you can stay educated on the issues that are going on in the community and how you can stay informed about them and figure out how to get the best information from them, and also to empower you and know that you have a voice in our community, and that as we continue to work together to identify issues going on in the community, we can work together to have positive change in the society that we live in here. So that's the goal of this podcast, and we also want to bring in our own experiences with civic engagement and voting, and explain how we got specifically involved and how you all can get involved too as well. To me, civic engagement is where you are trying to make sure that you are having positive change in society. It's you identify a certain issue going on in society, and you want to think about, okay, how can I make sure that we work together to come up with the solution, we understand what the problem is, and that we're working together to make sure that the problem is alleviated and that people aren't going through this anymore. So it's trying to have this positive change in society here.
Right. And to kind of add on to that, for me, civic engagement is definitely exercising your First Amendment right. We all have the freedom of speech, and we all have the freedom to get involved. And the government is supposed to be us, the citizens, and us collectively coming together to make positive changes that we see that may be negative in our community. So this is an opportunity for all of us to really come together and really work on the changes that we want to see manifested in our own communities.
And this is where voting comes in. That's essentially where you are using your voice to demonstrate that you want to have this specific thing be changed in society. It's you vote on a political candidate in an election season, like in the primary and the general election, where you're indicating that you want this person to be your representative, like in Congress or in the Assembly or the state Senate, as well as the president, the mayors. There's just a lot of things that you can really vote on. And when it comes to voting for political candidates, it's essentially saying that you believe that this person can best represent you in the community that you live in here too. And it doesn't just have to be for political candidates, it's also for ballot referendums, where you're just indicating that you want to have a certain law change in your state's constitution too as well. So it's really about demonstrating to the political leaders that I want this specific thing changed. This is the direction that I want to go in too. And by voting, you're demonstrating that this is where you want to go. Because if you don't vote, then how are political leaders going to know how society should be changed? Because if we're staying silent on something, then how is everyone going to know the feelings going on in society? What's the sense? What's the mood here? What can we do to really improve ourselves here? And if we don't really say anything about it, then we can't really change anything.
Right, and it goes back to the power of the voice. If we're not addressing our concerns in a way that is notable or tangible for the political leaders or the people who do have the power to make these changes, then it's not going to sound as if we even have a voice to begin with, or that we even have a problem that needs addressing. So along with civic engagement, and voting is a very important element of that, it's also just getting involved locally. Going to town hall meetings, or just pulling up to different events and stuff and just showing face and just addressing your concerns with your political leaders or your leaders in general about what you see in your neighborhood. It might be something across the street from you that's been continuously going on that that if you talk to somebody in a leadership role in your town hall, then they could perhaps make the change or make the difference. So voting is very important. I do believe that one thing we have not done so much growing up is getting civically engaged in terms of voting. And again, like let's say for instance, you have a political leader who's running. In order for this elected official to get into the seat, he needs particular votes. So he's going to lean towards, or maybe even favor, the side of the community that is more civically engaged and more involved. He's going to lean more towards what their wants are, what their needs are, what their desires are, because he's hearing the most from them. So in the same sense, if we as a people have particular concerns and maybe issues that need addressing, but we're not showing up, we're complaining about it all the time, but we're not actually going to the places where our voices could be heard, where change could be implemented, nothing's really going to be done about that. So that is something to always consider. So that's why your vote really matters, because voting has a lot of power. And there's certain instances back in the day, especially as people of color, where our voices was not recognized. We were not able to vote. We didn't have the same rights that we have today, where, you know, our grandparents and our grandparents' grandparents and stuff like that, like they were not able to go to the ballot. It was not accessible for them to just go out there and vote. And they really had the intention, they had the heart and the desire to do so, but they weren't necessarily able to do so because there were so many voter restriction laws and so many things that kind of prohibited them from even getting to the ballot. So I think now exercising that right, knowing that, you know, we don't have, especially in the city of Utica, like we don't have all these barriers. Like it's strongly encouraged for us to get to the ballot. Like we want to see more civic engagement. We want to see more voter registration. We want to see more people get involved. And this is such a great community where we want to see more activity when it comes to civic engagement. So I think exercising that is very essential and very important.
Yeah, I think what you said about consider where we were a long time ago to where we're at right now. It's really about making sure that we have our political system be very accessible to people, because like I said, a long time ago, it was only available for a small part of the US population. And it really, like, over time, like, eventually, like, you had those barriers, like, taken piece by piece out. It's like, okay, you can't be denied the right to vote based on your race, your gender, and then the age decreased too, as well as you can't like be denied the right to vote over literacy tests or poll taxes. It's like all those like inherent things about yourself, like that you literally, that's literally something that was denied a long time ago, and now it's not. But the thing is, when you're thinking about what's been happening in the past like decade or two, you're seeing like some of the voter restrictions starting to slip back in, like considering like Citizens United, for example, with campaign financing. You got to think about the influence that like big corporations and big like groups are like having, that's like influencing what we're thinking here, and how that can also influence the politicians and the political candidates on who they listen to as well. And then another example is like Shelby County versus Holder on like pre-clearance, where like the states that had a history of like voter restrictions essentially had to go to the federal government to get approval, but now that's been like taken away, and it's like, okay, now states can do like whatever they want, even if that means like that could put a heavy barrier on people voting, including black people too as well. So you have to like think about it and where we're going right now, and saying, do we want to go back to more restrictive things? And we don't want that. We don't want to have people being limited from expressing their voice and feeling demotivated to vote. So it's important that we like rise up and say that we want to have our voice. We want our voice heard because it's important. We want our community to not be static forever, like because humanity cannot stay static forever. We have to express what we're thinking about, be able to have a dialogue with people, be able to express our ideas, and be able to like think about, okay, what solutions can we come up with, and are they good solutions to you? That's like that critical thinking aspect to it. So if we're going to be like putting too much restrictions on this, then we're not fulfilling that democratic principle of letting the people express their viewpoints on the way society should go.
Right, for sure. And I also believe a big component is basically like these things, these actions, these laws being written, all of that stuff is kind of happening behind the scenes. You know, it's happening whether we speak up or whether we do not speak up. So by default, like there are things that are occurring in the world as we speak that, you know, it's a very small part of the citizen or part of the United States or in general, part of the world that's going to be actively involved to kind of make certain things happen. So if we do not come to the table to represent ourselves while these decisions are being made, it's still going to occur. But the difference is going to be whether or not it's going to occur in our favor or in favor of somebody who by default is going to make choices for us. So advocation is very important. If we don't have representation for ourselves sitting in those seats when these decisions are made, they're going to be made not in our favor. So it's important to have somebody who understands our struggle, somebody who understands what it is that we're going through. Even if it's something as simple as, you know, us having liquor stores on every corner that you don't see in a suburban neighborhood, but we have it over here. So because of that, like crime rate is a little higher by default. Like little things like that could be something that could be addressed, but a person who's sitting in the seat who may not have lived in the hood will be able to understand. So by having some type of representation or some type of individual who could sit in that seat who's closely related to our circumstances and what we came up in, they would be able to better address and better able to represent what it is that we need.
I've always felt a sense of being a part of some form of leadership. Like I've always felt like I wanted to serve my community in a particular way. I've always tried to advocate for whenever I felt like something was wrong, and especially when I was passionate about something. When I was extremely passionate about something, like I would go above and beyond to try to like really advocate in that area. So it wasn't till like 2021, I was actually just in the park. A friend of mine and I, we wanted to play basketball, so we went to Hurt Park over there in West Utica. And we were there, and there was like glass all over the place. There was like broken glass. There was debris, like leaves and straw and just debris from trees and stuff like that, just all over the basketball court. And it was just like, you know, this park is a mess. Like, you know, and you're thinking like little kids running through here. You know, you see kids every now and then running through. Some are barefoot, some aren't. And you're thinking like they don't even really have a nice place to come to who's directly in this circumference or this close proximity of this park. So it's just like, it started from there. Like I remember we got a broom, one of those push brooms, and then we just started cleaning the park. And then after that, like we just, you know, we started playing basketball, and as we were playing, we were just looking around like this park has so much potential. And then it stemmed from a question as we were playing, like, well, who's responsible for taking care of this park? And then from there, it just kind of dove into, well, why don't we be the ones who are responsible?
So yeah, I had a conversation with Dr. Harrison, and this is where I get into mentors too, like to close it off too. Mentors is really important too when it comes to navigating the political scene, because he like told me and a few other young people, like, when was the last time a political candidate asked you to be at the seat at the table? And I said, no, this is my first time. Exactly. So he really wanted me involved in this. So like we kept like going to different events together, and really like meeting different people and talking with them and like understanding like, okay, I'm learning new things, I'm talking with people. And when we did like the petitioning drive, like he asked me like, would you be interested in coordinating the effort? And in my mind, I'm like, sure, I'll do it, but I don't know. This is my first time doing it. Let's hope for the best and see where we're going. But again, that self-confidence, that public speaking really comes back. Like that foundation that I built up for those like the past several years, like really like it's starting to come to fruition here too. So it's like me asking people, would you sign this petition, and then having to explain to them like this is what it's about. It's about him getting on the ballot in the primary election too. So really, it's about being expressive with yourself and explain to people like what do you want to do and how can you help me essentially. And we were successful at the end, but like I would say like we met the requirement for my first time, especially like getting like 1,320 signatures was like putting all the technicalities aside. It's really like the people just showing like, okay, we're interested in him. And again, it goes back to collaborating with people and just talking with them and explaining like, this is what the purpose is, this is what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So my question would be like, if somebody were to want to be or get civically engaged or get involved, like what are some, I guess, pathways or avenues for them to actually, at least to start? Because I do know in this realm of, or this field, a lot of times it is the first time for a lot of different things. You know, there's a lot of different things that you're going to experience that are your first time experiencing it. Like you mentioned, that was your first time ever doing that. Like for me, it was my first time ever even getting involved. I just kind of jumped in the water without even testing it. Like, you know, so I just know a lot of times it may be your first time. So for somebody who may not know what avenues to take, where to get involved, who to talk to, stuff like that, what would you advise or even recommend or suggest to them?
Yeah, so of course, let's say if you're graduating from high school, you're getting into college right now, and of course this could vary depending on what college you go to, but most colleges do have like some politically active like groups and organizations, and there's also like cultural groups as well, so there could be and also public speaking groups too as well. Like those are groups I definitely recommend that you join if you're interested in having civic engagement, because you want to bring those skills for yourself, so that when you go out into the world and you're like starting to meet other people, you'll have that foundation laid out here. So like I said with mock trial, I was focusing on the public speaking aspect of it so that I can be expressive with myself too. For like cultural groups, so like Black Students Union, for example, too, it's like, okay, you're focusing on making sure that the resources are for like whatever resources are out there that the college is providing, that you're advocating for the Black community too. Same thing with like Hispanic groups, Asian groups, any religious groups out there too as well. Like those are like advocacy groups that are important that you can join, especially when it comes to like political groups too. Like there could be like college Democrats, college Republican groups. There's also Students for Democratic Society. There's also other activist groups that could be focused on a societal issue. It could be like a foreign policy issue. It could be any domestic issue too that that group is particularly focused on advocating for. And if that's something that you're really passionate about, then that is something that you could definitely ask questions about and see, is this an environment that I want to be in? So those are like organizations that you can definitely join in college. When it comes to people who aren't in college, like you're just living out in the community, like I said, volunteering, that would be a good opportunity. If there's like any voluntary opportunities that you can spend like a couple hours doing just for that one day, then like a food drive or clothing exchange, something like that. And if that's something like, okay, I'm interested in trying out, and if it's something, yeah, I want to do it again, or maybe I want to do my own thing, then talk with the leader, talk and see what more can I do with this as well. When it comes to town halls too, like that's important because there's like different town halls. It could be town halls for political candidates or a domestic issue or local issue. Like there was one recently on the police advisory board, like essentially just essentially like the community like voicing their like opinions on like the gun violence issues happening. That's essentially just an issues town hall where, okay, I'm expressing my opinion to the local leaders and politicians involved so that they know what the community is thinking and have them like think about, okay, what legislation do we want to put up that aligns with what they're thinking about too. And then when it comes to town halls for like political candidates too, that's where they're talking about their campaigns and them answering questions either from the moderator or from the audience too. And depending on which candidate you enjoy, if you are very motivated by them and say, yes, I want you to be my representative, I want to vote for you, and if you want to do more, then you can ask, is there any way I can volunteer to help you succeed? Like, what can I do? And the candidate will more than likely tell you, okay, here's what you can do. Here are some options. Pick which ones you feel most comfortable with, and we can go from there too, especially. So it's really, those are the type of things that like people can do to really get civically involved. It's like trying to be like, just giving out those accessible options out there, something like anyone can really do. It's just making sure that people know about them and they know that they can talk to those leaders in charge and ask how they can be involved, because people really want to have some sort of like meaning, like what more can I do? And if you like give them those options, like here's what you can do, and you explain like here's how you can help, then people are definitely willing to say, yes, I'm contributing something to society.
Right, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with the volunteer opportunities, definitely in town halls. If you are in like high school or college, different organizations such as clubs that may be associated with political environments, or even, you know, in local community. I mean, every ward has like different meetings through the neighborhood association. So if you're part of West Utica, you can go through the West Utica Neighborhood Association, South Utica, North Utica, East Utica, Cornhill. Respectively, each ward has their own meetings once a month that you could attend and get involved that way. Of course, you could always go to City Hall. There may be somebody there that you could speak to. Facebook groups, you name it. There's so many different avenues to get involved, and I think it starts with just taking that first initial step, and then once you take that step, then the first step leads to the next one, and before you know it, you'll be fully integrated into it, and it'll just kind of lead you in its own direction as you're on that path.
Well, thank you so much for watching this podcast. We really appreciate you listening to us and hearing about our story when it comes to getting involved in civic engagement and voting. And we hope that you are inspired by what we had to say and that you feel this call to action to get involved civically and to vote in the next election.